Uh, Chapter 12, as you might remember, is a continuation of 11, chapter 11, and also chapter 10 through 12 are really just one long vision that has been broken up into different sections. Um, Last week in chapter 11, we had a rather lengthy history of the north kingdoms, Syria, for instance, and the south, which would have been Egypt, and the back and forth between the kings and the leaders. And then we ended up with Antiochus Epiphanes up to chapter or verse 35, um, in talking about his dealings. And then things kind of shifted in at verse 36 from Antiochus into the Antichrist. So um, these first 3 or 4 verses here in chapter 12 is really a continuation on of what we ended up with at the end of chapter 11. So here we're going to see uh, this is Israel's trouble. We have a time of trouble that we've talked about in the past, that Israel is destined for um, time of Jacob's trouble. If you get into Jeremiah or the 70 weeks of Daniel, the uh, the tribulation or the great tribulation. So it has several names in different parts of the Bible. But here in verse 1 of chapter 12, we have a future time of trouble for Israel. So it says at verse 1, it says, "At that time, Michael, the archangel, shall stand up, the great prince who stands watch over the sons of your people. And there shall be a time of trouble, such as never was since there was a nation, even to that time." So we kind of remember um, Jesus says the same thing in Matthew 24. Says there will be and that if he didn't intervene, that no life would be spared, but for the sake of the elect, which are the Jews, he intervenes. So it's talking about at that time, which is really the time of the end. And we have Michael shall stand up. So, we have Michael, the archangel. Uh, he is Satan's opposite, if you will. Satan's not an opposite of Jesus, and he is the opposite of Michael, the archangel. So he's a high-ranking. Michael is a high-ranking archangel. Talks about the great prince who stands watch over the sons of your people. So he is his role. Michael's role is he's a spiritual warrior. He has a special job in protecting Israel. God has appointed Michael as the spiritual guardian over Israel. The time of there shall be a time of trouble. This refers to the time of persecution for Israel and the world calamity known as the Great Tribulation. So this would be the last 3.5 years of the tribulation. Like I said, this is also known as the time of Jacob's trouble, which Jeremiah chapter 30 talks about, verse 7. It says, "Such a time, or such as never was since there was a nation, even to that time." So the Jewish people, even today, as we're seeing what's going on in the world, the Jewish people have known many times of trouble through their history, from the horrors at the fall of Samaria and Jerusalem to the terrors that Antiochus Epiphanes brought on to the destruction of Jerusalem by the Romans in AD 70, the persecutions of the Dark Ages, Europe and the Holocaust in the 20th century. It often seems that all of Israel's history has been a time of trouble, but this is going to be a time. It's going to be a time of trouble. It'll be different. This will be worse than Israel has ever seen before. Like I said, Jesus quoted in Matthew 24, verse 21, "For then there will be great tribulation, such has not been since the beginning of the world until this time, nor ever shall be. With great sadness, we have to say that the Bible teaches that the worst has yet to come for Israel and the Jewish people. Revelation 12:13 through 17 tells us what makes this time so terrible, and it describes the fury of the devil directed against the Jewish people during this time. We had the seals, the trumpet, the judgments, the seal judgments, the trumpet judgments, the bowl judgments. In Revelation, they all describe the horrific conditions of the world in general during this time. But the Jewish people will be targets of full fury of the devil and his antichrist during this period, and will live in a world that is in incredible upheaval because of the judgments of God. We know, I believe, if I remember right off the top of my head, Zechariah 13 talks about the persecution is going to be so great that 2/3 of the Jewish people will perish. So it'll be a Holocaust time that doesn't compare to any other time that they've been through in history. The second half of verse 1, so it says, and at that time your people shall be delivered. So there's a deliverance here. Everyone who is found written in the book. So despite the terrors of this time, there is a deliverance assured. And no matter how great the attack is against the Jewish people, God promises to preserve them, and he will never break his promise. He won't break his promise to Abraham. And he said in Genesis 17:7, he says, I will establish my covenant between me and you and your descendants after you and their generations for an everlasting covenant. To be God to you and your descendants after you. And then he says, everyone who is found written in the book. So this promise of deliverance is not for every last person of Jewish heritage, but for these who are found written in the book. So this is the book of life. Not every person of Jewish heritage will be saved. Yet Israel as a whole will be known as a people at the end who trust in Jesus as their Messiah. Remember, they said when he will come again, when they say, blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord. So they will truly turn to the Lord at this time. Verse 2. So it says, and many of those who sleep in the dust of the earth shall awake, some to everlasting life, and some to shame and everlasting contempt. So it refers to the resurrection of the body in general. The Jews will be some, just like Christians, the dead in Christ will rise first. At the rapture of the church, the dead in Christ will rise first. Then we who are alive and remain shall be caught up together with them, and we will be with the Lord. At the same time, they will have those in contempt will be held in until the judgment. So the Bible clearly teaches two resurrections. One is going to be for the saved and one for the damned, if you will. And those are found in John 5:29, Revelation 20, verse 4 through 6. And then, of course, in Revelation 11 through 15. If we really believed that every one of us would live forever, it would profoundly change our lives. So, and it does if we believe in Christ and believe in everlasting life. So that's why we tell our loved ones and we tell whoever we can about the Lord. Verse 3, those who are wise shall shine like the brightness of the firmament, and those who turn many to righteousness like the stars forever and ever. So those who live in God's wisdom will shine despite the entire calamity that comes upon them. All the difficult coming upon Israel, God has those or keeps those who are wise, and they shall shine. It says, and those who turn many to righteousness, like the stars. So here, the wise among God's people are those who turn many to righteousness, or um, turn people to the Lord. All of God's people are like stars in the sense that they radiate light and help others to see and find their way. But certainly those who turn many to righteousness shine even more brightly, helping even more people see the light and to help find their way. So this promise applies to all the wise and all those who turn many to righteousness through all the ages. But it may have its roots or more specific application. If you remember, Revelation chapter 7 talks about the 144,000 evangelists. So this will be a time when these 144,000 Jewish evangelists they will tell, not only Israel about the Messiah, but they will help tell the whole world. They will evangelize. So the brightness of God's wise ones and those who turn many to righteousness will last forever. It isn't fading, it endures when so many others that we put, when so many other things that we put our efforts into, even if they succeed, they're only temporary. They give temporary satisfaction. We work our careers, our career will eventually fade. Our money fades away. Our lives eventually fade away. So it's worth to invest into the kingdom of heaven. Those things last forever. So verse 4 says, but you, Daniel, shut up the words and seal the book until the time of the end, where many will run to and fro, and knowledge shall increase. We've talked about this before. So to shut up the words, it implies that, the words should be kept safely until the time when they are needed. He seals the book, it's so the words or the book will be sealed until the time of the end. It really won't make sense to anybody until we're living in that time now. We're living in the end time. So really the last 150 years, the revelation of God in regard to the time of the end is suddenly making sense to people. There would come a day, the time of the end, when Daniel's prophecy would be even more important. Or have more importance. Therefore, it would be important to shut up his words and seal the book until the time of the end. Talks about many shall run to and fro, and the knowledge shall increase. So here is another description of Daniel describes a characteristic of the time of the end. Many will take this prediction as being fulfilled in the travel. Not only are we able to travel, we can get on a jet and go to the other side of the world in a day. Knowledge shall increase. So, we live in an age where computer science and artificial intelligence now seems to be in a place where it's able to take over the world. But not only that, like I said, it's talking about the knowledge of the things of the end. So it has more of an idea of people searching for knowledge, eschatology, for instance, the study of things of the end. So it has more of that sense than the forms of transportation or science. The idea is that people would run about trying to find the answers of the important questions as related to eschatology and the future. So the correct sense is that many shall search it through and through, and that as a consequence, knowledge of the book of Daniel itself shall be increased. So he says, shut up the words and seal the book. Daniel has revealed enough to us that the book really can be sealed. From Daniel 11:36 up through verse 3 of chapter 12, we see a world ruler who is utterly opposed to God. We see a world religion based on the abomination of desolation. We see a world war which defeats the ruler. We see this time of the Great Tribulation for Israel, which is lasting 3.5 years. A deliverance for the people of God after the tribulation. We see resurrection and judgment, and a reward for the righteous. Excuse me. Moving on, verse 5 says, "Then I, Daniel, looked, and there stood two others, one on this riverbank and the other on that riverbank. And one said to the man clothed in linen." So remember, we have this angel who possibly has the appearance of Jesus. I believe he's an angel of the Lord, who was above the waters of the river. And he says, "How long shall the fulfillment of these wonders be?" And then I heard the man clothed in linen, who was above the waters of the river, when he held up his right hand and his left hand to heaven, and swore by him who lives forever, that it shall be for a time, times, and half a time. 3.5 years, we see this over and over. "And when the power of the holy people has been completely shattered, all these things shall be finished." So we have these two others now on the riverbank, on either, if you picture it, one on either side of the riverbank. So Daniel is back at this riverbank that he first mentioned in Daniel 10. And if I remember right, if we go back, there's the Tigris. And so the visions here through Daniel 10 through 12 all took place as Daniel stood at this riverbank. So the one said to the one clothed in linen, "How long shall the fulfillment of these wonders be?" And so these other men on the riverbank were angels. It seems to be obvious. And then one angel asks the other, not for the benefit of the angel himself, but for Daniel's benefit and ultimately for our benefit. It says he held up his right hand and his left hand to heaven and swore by him who lives forever. So in a solemn oath, one angel announced that the time of trouble would last 3.5 years, which is the times and half a time. So this 3.5 year period is, like I said, is well known in other passages of Bible prophecy. Daniel 7:25 described it as a period that the saints are given into the Antichrist's hands. Daniel 9:27 describes it as the period between the breaking of the Antichrist covenant with Israel and time of the abomination of desolation and the establishment of Jesus' kingdom. In Daniel 12:7, it describes it as the duration of the time of trouble, or time of trouble for Israel. In Revelation 11:2, it describes it as a period that the holy city will be tread underfoot by the Gentiles. Revelation 11:3 described it as a period of ministry for the two witnesses. Revelation 12:6 and 12:14 describe it as a period that Israel and probably its remnant is preserved by God in the wilderness. Revelation 13:5 describe it as the duration of the Antichrist's authority to rule, to persecute, and to blaspheme. So taking all these together, we are obviously dealing with the last half of Daniel's 70th week, which is the Great Tribulation. And we know very little about the first half, but we seem to lump them all together, this full 7 years. But there's a lot going on in that first half that we can't really nail down in a time frame. So it says, when the power of the holy people has been completely shattered, all these things shall be finished. So the people of Israel will seem completely crushed as these things end. But at that time, the Messiah, upon whom they will trust before he returns, will return to rescue them. Like I said, Zechariah 13 talks about 2/3 will perish. Matthew 24 talks about for the sake of the elect that Christ will intervene. Verse 8, Daniel's last question is going to be how it all turns out, and then there's an answer that God will purify and preserve his people and has a set limit of days at that time. So verse 8 says, although I heard, I did not understand. Then I said, my Lord, what shall the end of these things, what shall be the end of these things? Okay, wrong page. And so the answer, he says, and then in verse 9, he says, and he said, go your way, Daniel, for the words are closed up and sealed till the time of the end. And many shall be purified, made white and refined, but the wicked shall do wickedly, and none of the wicked shall understand, but the wise shall understand. And from the time that the daily sacrifice is taken away, and the abomination of desolation is set up, there shall be 1,290 days. And blessed is he who waits and comes to the 1,335 days. But you go your way till the end, for you shall rest and will arise to your inheritance at the end of days. So the words are closed up and sealed till the end of time. Daniel must take a mental departure. He has all this stuff presented to him. He's got to make a mental departure from his questioning, because the revealing of these things will not come until the end of time. Until then, there's a sense in which these prophecies are closed up and they're sealed. So the massive interest in prophecy today, and the incredible development and understanding of biblical prophecy in the last 150 years, should make us see that we truly are at the end of time, or the time of the end. It says, many shall be purified, made white and refined. So this is another prediction that what was future to Daniel, because this degree of purification is only possible after the finished work of Jesus on the cross. Says, but the wicked shall do wickedly. So more specific, or most specifically, we would say that this prediction has to do with the end times, when the wickedness will abound more than ever, as we are seeing now. Seems like more so in the last month than any other time I can remember. So wickedness will abound more than ever, as in the Antichrist and his government. It'll be even worse in the near future, but an innumerable multitude will be saved. Remember, Jesus says the times will be like in the days of Noah, or he compares it to the days of Noah, or in the days of Lot. So wickedness will abound in that time. We know that there's going to be a great multitude known as tribulation saints that come out of the tribulation. So I know a lot of people are talking about I don't know. They're talking about, this great revival, this side of the rapture. We're going to have this great revival of the church, when the Bible doesn't speak of revival this side of the rapture. The Bible speaks of a great revival after the rapture, during the tribulation period. And says, from that time, from the time that the daily sacrifice is taken away and the abomination of desolation is set up, there shall be 1,290 days. So this prophecy here is amazingly specific. Daniel said that from the time of the abomination, you can simply start marking off your calendar to that final consummation of all things. It's 1,290 days later. And this is why Jesus pointed to Daniel's prophecy in Matthew 24, that the abomination of desolation would be a sign that would mark the immediacy of his return. And also he quotes basically Matthew 9:27, the abomination of desolation. It says, "Blessed is he who waits and comes to 1,335 days." So it's difficult to say what the relationship is between the 3.5 years mentioned in many places and the 1,335 days mentioned here. We could say that the end of 1,260 days that Jesus returns. At the end of 1,290 days, Jesus' government, remember, he's going to set up the millennial kingdom, so Jesus' government is officially installed. And then at the end of the 1,335 days, the nations are judged, the sheep and goat judgment, Matthew 25. So it's quite possible that this period of judgment of those that have lived through the tribulation period and have survived somehow during this Holocaust of God's, or when God's judgment will be poured out upon the earth, it's when they are brought to stand before Jesus at this judgment, the sheep and goat judgment. And then that this judgment of the Lord will take about, I guess, 45-day period. It says, but you go your way till the end. So instead of, let's see, so the angel concluded with an important reminder. He says to go your way till the end. So God has a course that he wanted Daniel to complete, and Daniel needed to remain focused on that. So fairly quick through chapter 12, we had those 13 verses. I want to jump in and do a recap. We got about a half hour, and I worked out just fine there because I was giving about a half hour for the study and then a half hour for the recap. So if we want to go through and kind of go over what we touched on from chapter 1 through chapter 12, I'll start in chapter 1 and just kind of work through the key points that we covered over the last few months. The time frame in chapter 1 is 605 BC. We have King Nebuchadnezzar. If you remember, he took captives from Jerusalem, mainly the youths, the young males, to train them in the ways of the Babylonians. So we have Daniel, who's one of these youths. We have Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. They were all part of this group of captives. And you remember that they did not eat. So the king wanted them, and Nebuchadnezzar wanted them to eat the delicacies, of the king. But they chose the non-kosher delicacies instead, and they only ate, if you want to call them that, they only ate vegetables and drank water. So you can see how God blesses us, through this, because they came out on the other end 10 days later looking better than those youths who did eat the non-kosher delicacies of the king. So you can see how God blesses in that sense. We are not to partake of the delicacies of the world in that sense. We're called to be separate, to be in the world, but not of the world. So this has a lesson for us today as believers. We see Daniel is faithful to God, and God blessed him and them because of this. They look better after 10 days and more healthy than the others who ate from the king's food. So God shows favor, and in the end, they're promoted. And we'll see this throughout Daniel, at least these first few chapters, that Daniel or Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego are always favored or promoted at the end. Chapter 2, we have Nebuchadnezzar's dream. So he has this disturbing dream, if you remember, and demands his magicians or astrologers, the sorcerers, or the Chaldeans, he wants them to tell him what his dream was, and also the interpretation, which they couldn't do. So no one could tell the dream or interpret it. And so because they couldn't, he sentences them all to death, and this includes Daniel, because now Daniel's part of this group of elites, so to say. So Daniel, upon finding out about this, he prays to God, and God gives Daniel the dream and its interpretation. So he goes to tell this to Nebuchadnezzar, that he can tell the dream, or God actually can tell what the dream is and its interpretation. So the dream is that, so Nebuchadnezzar sees an image or a statue with the head of gold, the chest of silver, the bronze thighs, the legs and feet of iron, the feet mixed with iron and clay. There's a great stone also cut without hands that came and crushed this image, and the stone became a great mountain. So this stone represents Jesus crushing these nations. The silver, bronze, and iron mixed with clay, the gold head, all represent empires. The gold represented Nebuchadnezzar's and the Babylonian Empire. Silver was the Medo-Persian Empire. The Greeks were the bronze, and then the iron mixed with clay was the Roman Empire. The stone, like I said, being Jesus, and his empire lasts forever. If we looked at the time frame of the existence of these empires, the Babylonians only lasted 66 years. The Medo-Persians were 208 years. The Greeks lasted for 185 years. The Romans lasted more than 500 years, but I believe that they never completely disappeared. I believe that they're just kind of in a dormant state, and there will be a revived Roman Empire represented by the 10 toes of this image or statue. They are 10 kings or kingdoms, or a 10-nation confederation that will arise out of the revived Roman Empire. And this will be, of course, in the last days, before Christ returns. Upon hearing this, Nebuchadnezzar falls on his face and he praises God, and he promotes Daniel. And like I said, Daniel is always promoted or shown favor for the rest of his life. We move on to chapter 3. It's the story of this fiery furnace. So we have Nebuchadnezzar again. And so all this time, God is working with Nebuchadnezzar. He gives God praise, and then he gets puffed up with pride again. And so it goes through this cycle. But Nebuchadnezzar, he makes an image or statue of gold, and then gathered all the dignitaries, the higher ups, to a dedication ceremony of this statue or this image. And so when they're told, when the music starts to play, that they're supposed to bow down and worship this image, and whoever does not worship this image will be thrown into a fiery furnace. So we have Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. They refused to worship, and they were thrown into this furnace. The furnace is heated 7 times hotter. He tells his guys to heat it 7 times hotter. And remember that the guards that threw them into the fiery furnace, they were killed because of the heat. So Nebuchadnezzar, he looks in and he sees 4 people in the furnace. And he says, I thought we threw in 3, but I see 4, and one looks like the Son of God. So he releases them from the furnace. They're unharmed. There's no signs of smoke or singed hair, or their clothes are fine. So the king, again, he praises God, and he makes a decree that no one should speak against God. And so these guys get promoted. Chapter 4, we have the humbling of Nebuchadnezzar. So Nebuchadnezzar, he has this dream, another dream. He dreams of a tree. And Daniel gives this interpretation that this great tree represents Nebuchadnezzar, and that the beasts take shade in it, or under it. The birds nested in it. Its fruit was abundant, and that all flesh was fed from it. But the tree is chopped down, and the leaves are stripped off, and its fruit is scattered. So Daniel's interpretation is that Nebuchadnezzar would be humbled for 7 years, in the sense that he would be humbled in insanity, if you will. He was made to eat grass like an ox, and his nails grew like claws. There's no mention of Nebuchadnezzar for this 7-year period of history between 582 and 575 BC. So just to throw that out there. At the end of the 7 years, he repents, his kingdom is restored, and he blesses God again. So in the end, I think we see Nebuchadnezzar, we'll see Nebuchadnezzar in heaven. I believe that he was finally a believer who put his faith in God. He reigned for 43 years, and when he died, there were several other kings of that lasted of short duration. We end up with a guy named Belshazzar. So in Daniel chapter 5, we have the story of the writing on the wall. And Belshazzar, if you remember, has this blasphemous feast or a party. And he used the sacred vessels, or the cups, to party with, that were taken by Nebuchadnezzar from the temple in Jerusalem. And so while they're partying it up, he sees, or they see, a finger of a man's hand appeared and wrote on the wall. And so if you remember, he was so afraid of what he's seeing, his knees were knocking together. They're looking for someone to bring in, or to interpret what is written on the wall. And remember the queen mother, who could have been Nebuchadnezzar's wife, or could have been a grandmother. Somebody in that line recommends Daniel. And so Belshazzar, he's called Daniel to come in and interpret this dream, or not this dream, sorry, the writing, which says many tekel of Upharsin, which means that God has numbered your kingdom. This is his interpretation. God has numbered your kingdom. You have been weighed in the balances and found wanting. Your kingdom has been divided and given to the Medes and Persians. So he promotes Daniel again for giving the interpretation to the writing. And it's a short-lived promotion, because that very night the Persians, the Medes and the Persians, broke in to the city of Babylon, took over. They killed King Belshazzar. So then we have Darius, who took over the kingdom under the rule of Cyrus, the Persian. And the next empire here we see is set up to rule. So we go from the Babylonians to the Persian Empire. And so Daniel chapter 6, we have the story of the lion's den. And under Darius, he has these governors, or these leaders, satraps is what they're called. They're jealous of Daniel, and they sought to have him taken out. So they devised a scheme and presented it to Darius, and he signs it. And it says that for 30 days, no one could worship any god except for Darius, King Darius. Daniel refused, and he prays like it was his custom to pray 3 times a day. And he did this in defiance, with his windows open, so all could see that he was praying to his God. So Daniel, he's thrown into the lion's den, but the Lord saves him. Darius releases Daniel, and instead throws in, this is just a quick overview, throws the governors, or the satraps, and their families are thrown to the lions, and they're pounced on and killed immediately. And so Darius, the new king or the new leader, he decrees that all people, that all the nation must honor God. And so Daniel again prospers. We have chapter 7 now, so things change, and we start, Daniel starts having visions. He has a vision here of 4 beasts. So this is Daniel's first vision, and it's a broad summary of the times of the Gentiles with emphasis on the climactic events that are culminating in the second coming of Christ to earth. So we have Daniel has this vision, and there is an interpretation of 4 beasts, which represent 4 empires. So it says the first beast is like a lion, and this is represented by the Babylonian Empire. The second was like a bear, which represents or represented the Medo-Persians. The third was like a lion, or I'm sorry, like a leopard, represents the Greeks. And so in each animal is mighty, and it dominates its prey in a different way. So the lion devours, the bear crushes, and the leopard springs upon its prey. And then we have a 4th beast, which is dreadful. It's a 10-horned beast with 1 conspicuous horn. And this represents the Roman Empire and also the revived Roman Empire. The 10 horns are a 10-nation confederation of the revived Roman Empire, and the conspicuous horn is none other than the Antichrist. And so these horns, these 10 horns, are also representative of the 10 toes of Nebuchadnezzar's dream. So we have this introduction here also. Remember, we had this discussion on who the Ancient of Days might be. And so we learned that this is Jesus Christ, and the conspicuous horn is conquered by the Son of Man, or rather Jesus. The saints of the Most High will receive the kingdom, which is God gives them the kingdom when Jesus returns as the Messiah. So that's a brief overview of chapter 7. Chapter 8 is another vision of the ram and the goat, and also the little horn, or a little horn. And so this is Daniel's second vision, which concerns the future of the Persian and the Greek empires. And Daniel has the vision and then is given an interpretation by the angel Gabriel. And so we have the ram, which represents the Persian, and the goat represents the Greek empires. And the Greek empire is represented by Alexander the Great as the notable horn, who conquered the Persians and ushering in the next world empire. So now we have the Greek Empire. We have Alexander's large horn is broken when he died, and we have 4 notable horns that spring up in its place. So the 4 horns are Alexander's 4 generals that we learned, who divided up the Greek Empire. In chapter 8, also verse 9 onward, we're introduced to a little horn, which is represented as Antiochus the 4th Epiphanes. And so we know here that this little horn is not the same as in chapter 7, which Antiochus is a type or a picture of the Antichrist, but he is not the Antichrist of the Great Tribulation. So we talked about how he came to power. Remember, he had his brother who was on the throne. He had him thrown into prison and then had him killed. We talked about how he came to, against the Jews, and how he desecrated the temple by erecting a statue of Zeus on the altar, and he desecrated the temple by sacrificing a pig, bringing an end to the daily sacrifices. And that lasted, the angel Gabriel said that would be 2,300 days. So the 2,300 days ended on December 25th of 165 BC, when the altar was finally cleansed after the Maccabean revolt. We talked about also when we looked at the book of Maccabees, the different things that Antiochus did and how he persecuted the Jews at that time. So we get a description of both Antiochus and the coming Antichrist of the end. So one fulfilled in history, and one will be fulfilled in the coming near future. So this vision is sealed up also, and it is referred to many days in the future, which is similar to what we just read in Daniel 12:4. Daniel's also told to seal up that vision. Daniel 9 is the 70 weeks prophecy. So Daniel understands that the time of Israel's captivity is about to come to an end after 70 years. Their punishment for the desolations was nearing an end, so Daniel intercedes in prayer and makes confession for not only his sins, he includes himself in there, but the sins of his people. And while praying, here again we have the angel Gabriel appears again and comes to announce that he has come to bring an answer to Daniel's prayer and to understand this vision. So he says 70 weeks are determined for the Jews and for Jerusalem. The 70 weeks are 70 weeks of years. So I know some had a hard time understanding what it meant as 70 weeks of years. If you could look at it as 70 periods of 7 years, or rather 70 times 7, we come up with a total of 490 years. And so so determined for the Jews and for Jerusalem, it says for your people. So these are the things that will happen within this 70 weeks or 490 years period. It says for your people, for the holy city, to finish the transgression, to make an end of sins, to make reconciliation for iniquity, to bring in everlasting righteousness. Spell check didn't like that word, so see, to seal up the vision and the prophecy, to anoint the most holy, and all this stuff will happen within the 70 weeks. So the 70 weeks or 490-year period begins with a decree to restore and rebuild Jerusalem. And that is a commandment that was given by Artaxerxes to Nehemiah in the year 445 BC. So if the Jews would have recognized from Daniel's prophecy the time frame involved, they would have seen the Messiah, or they did see the Messiah, but they didn't recognize him. He would arrive 100,070. Let me try this again. 100,073. 170. Let me try this again. Sorry, guys. 173,800 days. 173,800 days later. So this, if they started counting from the time that Artaxerxes gave the decree, they would have counted this time frame until they saw the Messiah coming. We had 69 weeks, or 483 years had been fulfilled up to this time. So all this stuff had been fulfilled up until the time Christ came, and he was rejected and, of course, crucified. At this point, the 70 weeks had been put on a pause. So we still have 1 week of 7 years, a period of 7 years left, which will be fulfilled during the tribulation. It says in 9:27, then he, the Antichrist, will confirm a covenant with the many for 1 week, which is 7 years. And in the middle, which is a 3.5 year point, he shall make an end to sacrifice and offering. So similar to Antiochus Epiphanes. So the Antichrist we know that the Antichrist will not be revealed until the rapture of the church. 2 Thessalonians 2, 3 through 4. And Jesus also mentions in Matthew 24, when you see the abomination of desolation standing in the temple, this is what he mentioned or referenced it to Daniel. He says, then those who are in Judea should flee to the mountains. We believe they are going to flee to a place called Petra. So moving on, chapters 10 through 12, they make for this one long vision. So at this point, Daniel is an old man. He's in his mid-80s. Daniel has lived the entire 70 years of Babylonian and Persian captivity. And we see Daniel here in chapter 10. He's mourning by prayer and by fasting. He's praying and mourning for 3 weeks or 21 days, probably because of the concern for the pilgrims. So the pilgrims had returned to Jerusalem by this point. And they are meeting with opposition in rebuilding the walls or rebuilding the temple. So Daniel's probably in mourning because of this, and this is why he's fasting. And while fasting, he sees a vision of an angel of the Lord who says that he had fought against the prince of Persia along with Michael the archangel to bring Michael the archangel helps this angel to bring Daniel an understanding of what will happen to his people in the latter days. So this angel continues on with what we talked about last week in chapter 11, with a prophecy of the near future up through the first 35 verses, and then of the Gentile rulers and the battles between the north and the south, which is Syria and Egypt. And it gives a lot of minute detail. And then, of course, that history and those battles culminate with Antiochus Epiphanes. And then as we go through some of his history there, it suddenly changes at verse 36 of chapter 11, and it changes from Antiochus to a future vision of the Antichrist. So we see similarities, and we see types, and we see pictures in Antiochus and the coming Antichrist. We get more detail of what the Antichrist will do, especially at the end of his short reign, when he gathers the nations against the Lord at Armageddon. So that pretty much covers it. And then what we went through tonight in chapter 12, that is our recap of the book of Daniel. So we made it.